Good morning and happy Wednesday. Nice to see you again this morning. We have Rob. Rob, can you tell us, can you either put in the chat or just tell us, where are you located? I'm not sure I'm familiar with where you are. Please put that in. And Stacy as well, please. Stacy, thanks for being with us. Can you just let us know what market you serve? Thanks. Oh, New Jersey. Okay, got it. Thank you. You know, this is a busy week for me. I just had my leadership program. I've run a leadership program for about 15 years now here in Westchester County, just north of New York City. And we take 20 people from all walks of life, for-profits, nonprofits, government folks, and we put them together for a year. And we dive deep into a lot of topics on leadership. And one of the topics that often comes up, of course, is this topic of how do we manage expectations with other people in our lives? And for many people, they're thinking about it within the context of the business that they run. For others, it's about, family relationships. How do we get our kids to clean up their room? How do we get our spouse to, follow through on X, Y, or Z? It's a challenge for everybody. And so, it's good that we're talking about it here. And I'm going to ask you guys to contribute to the conversation in a couple of ways today. First, I'm going to ask you right now, and Chirag sometimes asks this at the beginning of the call, so I'm just curious if you guys can have something that you can put in the chat here. What's a win that you've had over the last week or two as a leader? We've talked about roles, we've talked about teamwork, we've talked about expectations recently. I've suggested a bunch of steps in between. Some of you I know are doing some of those things, some maybe not yet. I'm just curious, is there something that you can point to in the last couple of weeks that you feel is a win for you as a leader? If so, put it into the chat. It's not so easy, right? It's easier to say, well, I got to win because I closed a deal or I, got some kind of a good lead or referral or something like that. Okay, that's the win. But when we're talking about leadership, we're not talking about managing the deals themselves. That falls more in the category of management than leadership. And so when we're talking about, achieving a goal as a leader, it's not necessarily about managing a deal perfectly or managing more deals than this time last year or something like that, right? There's so many other considerations here around the people side of the team, not the task side of the team. And so it's important that you maintain some focus on that as you go forward and not get drawn into all of the business deals of the day, and keep this focus, as I've suggested before, 1% of your time a week, thinking about leadership stuff. Rob says getting better participation from team members. Great. Rob, can you come on off mute for just a minute, please, and just tell us, how do you account for that? How do you think that that's happened? Is there something specific you did or what? Please help us. Please let us know.
I sort of recently started a accountability group within my team where it's kind of like a little bit of a give and take. If they participate, show up, follow the tasks, kind of like weekly tasks. And then, in exchange, they get more leads that are like paid leads for me. So it's kind of a way of, sort of following through with the investment in those leads to make sure, we're all getting a return on them. And then as a result, it's kind of like dangling a carrot a little bit, and you can really mix in a lot of other strategies and things weekly to help them gain or improve their business aside from the leads. So we've had a pretty good turnout, so I'm happy about it. Hoping to sort of like expand it a little bit.
Congratulations, Rob. That's great. Congratulations. So, one of the elements of leadership is about maintaining motivation for everybody on the team, right? There's some role that we get to play as a leader so that our people choose to play the game at the highest level they're able, not just like quiet quitting, as we talked about before. Keith, let me ask you, you'd say your team has vocalized their desire to step up. How do you account for that? What's happened to make that happen, do you think?
Just truthfully, I think you meeting with them made them come forward to me, because I don't think that they would have had you not had that time with the team directly, and basically say, hey, we never even really thought about everything that we do as a team and how because it's the only thing they've known.
Mm-hmm.
The person on the team, the only team they've been on is my team. And as we've moved forward together, and after the conversation with you, they've literally said, hey, we understand that there's things that we can do that would have, just take it off my mind. And so it's been good.
Got it. Glad to hear that. Yeah.
We're only 10 days into that, right? So
for everyone's background, I spent a little time with Keith and his team, and we talked about a certain number of items. And so I'm glad to hear that there's a positive result there. We all want to make sure that we're working on the business and not just working in the business. And especially your team members, you have to make a decision as a leader whether you want them to simply work in the business or you want their help and collaboration in working on the business. Because there's tremendous value for any business if all the people are like inputting what it is they have to input. Japan is famous for this concept called Kaizen, which is like constant improvement. And it comes from a commitment that everybody makes to not just do their job, but think about how the jobs can be done better. And, there's communication around those kinds of things. Stacy, last one from you. You're talking about great reception from the agents in developing roles as well as culture. Can you give us like one reason why you think that's happened on your particular team?
Hi, David. Good morning. Sure. Part of the reason is because I just brought 2 new agents on, so they're very eager, and I have an opportunity to start things with them from the very beginning. So as opposed to my other team member who's been with me for about 2.5 years now, although she's always pretty positive as well, but we've been able to collaborate as a team in putting these things together. The difficulty has been in my putting it all on paper and representing it to them because they're new. And when I say new, I mean they're just licensed. They don't even know how to write a contract yet.
Yep.
It's been rather taxing on me to help train them. So that's been taking time away from my ability to do not only, the role playing and the culture and put it on paper, but some of the other things that I'm learning with Chirag that I need to be doing that I just don't have the time. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, did I bite off more than I could chew? What do I do?
Understood. Well, it's, the business is nothing more than a collection of people doing something together. And, a lot of us would like the business to run automatically, like somehow referrals come in or leads come in and somehow we magically convert them and somehow the contracts get written and the houses get shown and deals get closed and everything's great. But the reality is we're managing a bunch of people every single day. And some of them are more motivated, some of them are less, some of them are more experienced, some of them are less. It's great when you have new people come onto the team because you can acculturate them. I prefer to use the word acculturation rather than just training. Because training seems to like narrow our thinking just to like, here's the skills you need to know and then go off and do it. But as a member of a system, a human system, which is what a team is, there's more to it than simply reducing people to a set of roles and tasks, right? There's something about how do we build relationships? How do we build motivation? How do we build a willingness to reach across and support each other? That kind of stuff is also important to the success of the team. So I often think about it as an acculturation process, which includes helping them learn the skills and tasks they need to master, as well as the other elements of the team that matter, the values of your team and how that plays out in serving clients, that kind of a thing. So congratulations. I know it's a tough burden to acculturate a brand new team member. There is a big commitment that you have to make, and sometimes people shy away from it because of that commitment. But you do have to ask yourself in the long run, are we better off me sacrificing some time now to develop a couple of people who will be really great down the road? Or do I just want to kind of get sucked into all the other stuff that I feel I need to do right now to manage the stuff that I have? And there's no perfect answer to that question. It's just a business decision that you need to make.
Yeah, well, your guidance this year has been truly helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. So here's a big question for everybody. Last week, I shared with you the eye-opening question. Remember what the eye-opening question was? The eye-opening question is a question that you ask your team members, which is, what do you believe are the expectations that I have of you? And the reason this is an eye-opening question is almost every time a leader does it, he or she gets back something that was really not expected. Like you think you've pounded this message into everybody's heads 85 times. And if you ask them a simple open-ended question like that, you only get that message back from 30% of them. Like, what happened? Or you think you're delivering message A, what they're hearing is message B, which may be close to what you intended or maybe not close. So I'm just curious, has anybody asked that question of any of your staff members this past week? And if so, what kind of an answer did you get? Love to hear from you. What do you believe are the expectations that I have of you? That's the question. And then just shut up and listen. And whatever they tell you, write it down, take some notes, and then think about it afterwards. Because a huge mistake that we typically make, and I've seen this not just in real estate, but I've worked in, car business and pharmaceuticals, and many other businesses. The same thing happens over and over again. The leader thinks everybody is on the same page with him or her when they're really not. We have some assumption that everything we're saying is getting through when it really isn't. And, if you're a parent and giving messages to your kids, you kind of assume that they're not going to get a lot of the messages. And maybe you're surprised if they actually do prove to you that they got one message about, I don't know, being honest or considerate or something like that. In the business world, it tends to be the opposite. We tend to think everybody's on the same page with us when we're not. So, Keith, do you mind sharing with us what kind of a response you got? And you don't have to. I don't want to force you if it's private, if it's within the team.
I'm extremely transparent about what we do.
Okay.
And I don't, I have an open palm mentality. That's how I've always thought. And the initial question actually provoked hey, can I actually think about that? And I mean, the team now. So, I did it with Heidi, who I consider to be my go-to person on the team. If I'm not there, she's who people look to on the team. And so her initial response was, hey, can I think about that? Like, do I have to answer right now? And so I'm like, yeah, think about it. Like, and I told her it's not a test. I just want to know your thoughts. I want to know, more along the line to make sure as we go into 2023 that we're not, what I said to her, we're not trying to do success the way that I perceive it. I want to do success the way that we work towards. Like, might be different for you than it is for me. And I've never thought about that till we started the Chirag coaching, till we started these coachings, because I've always had my idea of what success is for everybody on the team, but never really honestly asked any of them because they've never balked at what I've said. They've never done that. So her initial response was just, let me think about it, which she did. And she came back and I think, I don't know, we were probably 50-50. There was more stuff that I did expect from her than what she thought of. And I didn't blow out and say, hey, well, did you remember this, remember that, remember that? I just, I took it in and said, okay, I got something to work on.
All right. Thanks for sharing that with everybody. That's a very common response. There's nothing wrong with the person taking time to think about it. It's like, it would be ideal if you had 3 expectations that you had written down on paper that you said, yep, I want everybody, to know this, and this is really important to me and our team's success. And then whenever you quiz them coming out of the bathroom or eating lunch or whatever, and you say it, and then they feed them back perfectly, great, that's wonderful. Usually doesn't happen. And there's nothing wrong with the person saying, you know what, I'm not really sure, let me think about it, because chances are they've never been asked that before. What we typically do is we form a team and we just say, okay, I'm just going to lead the team, and the people show up and they try to do their best and they follow the messaging and everything as best they can. But there's a huge loss factor in there. Typically, we think the messages are all getting through and they typically don't. So when you ask your team members this, do it one-on-one and see what kind of a response you get. And it'll tell you how far apart they might be from where you think they are. Now, one thing you can do in this is you can write down your expectations ahead of time. You say, just sit back when you have 15 minutes and say, what are my expectations of everybody on my team? And write down in black and white what those expectations are. I expect everybody to show up for meetings on time. Or I expect everyone to manage the paperwork within X amount of time. Or I expect everyone to do 4 hours of lead gen a week. Whatever your expectations are of the team, write them down in black and white so that you're clear about what they are. Chances are you're probably clear about some of them. Others maybe are kind of on your mind, but you realize in doing this that maybe you never really communicated it very clearly or enough to the people on the team. And if you haven't done that, of course, there's no way that they're going to understand that that's an expectation, nor can they kind of aim for it. So I suggest you do this before you have a expectation setting meeting with the team, because then that'll give you a chance to see where people are. If you find out that people are pretty close to where you are, then the meeting might go one way. You might want to handle it a certain way. If it turns out the folks are really in a different place from where you expected them to be, you might want to run the meeting differently. So I'm going to share a couple of slides with you right now on how to plan and run a simple meeting like that. So when the time is right, you can come back to the slide deck if you want, but you can take notes, whatever. But this is a simple way to run a meeting like this, What's important to remember is when you're talking about expectations, especially in a team setting, it's important that you do it along the lines of your team values and beliefs. In other words, if you think teamwork is important, don't come in and dictate to everybody in this meeting, right? You got to do this, 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 and this, or you're fired, my way or the highway, right? That's not going to fly with anybody, especially if you're preaching at other times. It's important for us all to listen to each other and be a good team and support each other or something like that, right? You want the experience of the meeting for the people to be fully in alignment with how you run the business or how you want the business to be run. So if you have an expectation, for example, everybody should listen to everybody else, and you're going to run the meeting in a way you're not listening to anybody, that message is not going to land, right? So you want to think about how you want to bring yourself to the meeting. So let me pull this up. Okay. And by the way, I'm going to stay on till 10:30 again today, as we have the last couple of weeks, in case anybody has any other questions about this or anything else related to leadership. So today's conversation is about managing the expectation meeting. And you can think about it in 3 steps. It might be similar to like a pitch or something. There's before, during, and after. All right, announcing the meeting. So what you're going to want to do is give people a little bit of a heads up. And by the way, this is something you could do also, you know, as Keith asked his team member, and she wasn't really quite prepared to respond at that moment. Another way you could ask this question is send it out on an email to your staff members one by one and say, hey, listen, I'm just curious, you know, what are the messages you're getting about what my expectations are of you, right? Or you say, what do you believe are the expectations I have of you? And then say, I'd love to talk to you in 2 days. So can you just think about it a little bit, and we'll talk on Friday at 10:30, and, you know, you can give me whatever your answer is. So you can also give them kind of a heads up in that case, instead of like not confronting them, but, you know, connecting with them in the moment. If you find that a couple of your team members really have never thought about it and need a little time, or if you think that the answer that you're getting in that case is coming from a place that the person has no idea how to answer the question, then you can also say, listen, if you need a little time to think about it, I'm happy to talk to you in another day or two. Would that be helpful to you? And the person might say, yeah, I might need another day or two. And you say, okay, great. So let's just talk in a couple of days. Similarly here, before you have the meeting, like, you don't want to just spring this expectations conversation on the team. You want to announce it to everybody ahead of time so that they have some awareness and they can think about it a little bit. Because this is an important factor, but it's not something that people talk about every day, right? As a leader, it's important for you to manage expectations. But most leaders kind of don't. They just throw the messages out there and they expect people to get them. What we're talking about here is a planned and purposeful discussion around expectations, one success factor on a team. So it's simple as something like this. It's important for all of us to be on the same page. So I want to have a meeting next Tuesday around 10:30 to talk over team expectations. It's just a heads up. It can be done verbally. It can be sent on an email. What you're saying to people is, it's important for us to be on the same page, right? You're saying that's the rationale here for this, right? So I want to have a meeting. So just so you guys know, heads up. And you don't have to add anything more to that. If you want to, it's perfectly fine. If you want to give some people to think about, that's fine. You don't have to. But simply giving the heads up gives them the awareness that a conversation is coming. Now, some people might get a little bit nervous, you know, so they might say, oh my gosh, am I not measuring up? And is she going to lay down the law on us? You know, that could be that somebody might do something like that. And if you feel that somebody on your team tends to like go negative whenever they hear something like this, you might want to add another sentence, which is, hey, you know what, you know, it's not going to be about judgment or talking about the past. I just want to like have a conversation about what I think is important going forward for all of us. And I'd love to get your kind of input. Let's have some dialogue on that. So that the person knows that you're not here to judge anybody. You're not here to find them at fault or anything like that. So announcing the meeting comes first. Now, preparing for the meeting, there's a couple of steps that are helpful here. Certainly ask the eye-opening question that we talked about before, and make a list, as I said a minute ago, make a list of the expectations that you think are important, and really probably no more than 3 or 4 team-wide. And it might just be 1 or 2, doesn't matter. If all you insist on is people showing up in the meetings on time, fine, that's enough. If you think that's important to the business, then that's an expectation that everybody should know about. If you think people should be doing 3 hours of lead gen a day, 3 hours a week, whatever it is, if that's the expectation, put it out there, right? You're putting it out there in no uncertain terms. So make the list ahead of time. And this may require a little kind of thought and reflection from you, because you may never have done this before. But it's important for you to be clear about what your expectations are. You know, don't put them on there lightly. Don't put them on there kind of half-assed. Be really clear in your own mind about what are the things that are really important to the success of our business that I want to make sure that people are following. And it could be as little as 1 to 3 or 4. Secondly, write down exactly what you think you'd like to say in the meeting. Practice it. See how it sounds. Remember, this is the first time for many people to have a conversation like this, and they might interpret the way you put something out there in a way that's not exactly as you expected. So when you write down your list of what the expectations are, just put it down on paper and say, so it's really important, I think, for us to have good conversations with each other. And one of the things that's important is for us to be on time. I want to respect your time. I want you to respect everybody else's time. So when we have meetings on Tuesdays and Fridays, let's make sure we get there on time, and I'll make sure we end on time. Right? Something like that. Put it down in black and white. See if it sounds like or feels like how you might say it. And practice saying it if you feel you need to. In fact, practice it out loud in front of your spouse or some person on your team that you trust and say, how does this sound? Right? You're preparing yourself for the actual conversation so that the conversation goes well. Third, make sure that you have a rationale for the expectation. If you just say, I want you to show up on time for meetings, that's one thing. But if you say, it's important for us because everyone's really busy to manage our time carefully. Therefore, I want to make sure that we start meetings on time and end meetings on time. Right? That way people have a rationale for why. There's been a lot of studies done regarding rationales, and what they find is compliance is usually 2 to 3 times higher when people understand the rationale for the request rather than just the request. There was an interesting study they did a number of years ago in Kansas City, where they went to a bunch of bus stops. And the reason that they went there was the bus stops had like a 2-sided open bus stop with a roof on it, like a glass kind of a thing. And they went out on rainy days and they went to busy bus stops, and the testers actually got online and said to everybody, can you please step underneath the roof? And they measured how many people moved and how many feet they moved underneath the roof to make room for the tester, which they didn't know was a tester. And then they said, and the other ones, that was the control. And then the variable was, they said, can you please move underneath the roof because I'm getting wet out here. And when they did that, what they found was that the people moved nearly twice as far and nearly twice as many people moved. And so simply providing that rationale can make a huge difference in compliance. So make sure that you have a valid rationale for what it is you're asking. That's preparing for the meeting. Here's a couple examples. Deals won't come as easily as they did for us last year. Therefore, I want to ask all of you to aim for 3 hours of focused lead gen a week. Fine. The rationale comes first and then the expectation. Or we've lost 2 clients in the last 3 months because we didn't follow up fast enough. Therefore, I want to ask everyone to focus on responding to client inquiries as a top priority. Or it's, let's make sure that we respond to every inquiry within 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever it is. But you see, again, the rationale there is first, and then the statement or the expectation is the second part of it. During the meeting, a couple things to keep in mind. First, start the meeting by restating the purpose. You can say, hey, everybody, thanks for being here. We're here to talk about expectations that I have for all of us. Make sure you say us and not you, right? If you say expectations I have for all of you, it kind of distances you from everybody. So it's important to say, this is why we're here. We're here to talk about expectations that I have for all of us. Now, as you lay out the expectations, it's quite possible that you'll get a little pushback from a person, or maybe they're a little confused, and you might consider it a objection of a kind. Right? And it may be a request for more information because they're not quite clear, or somebody might not be comfortable with it. And so it's important for you to be able to listen, spend some time kind of putting it out there and then listening back for what kind of a response you get, watching body language, that kind of thing, right? You need to be really intuitive here. Use your sales skills to read where the people are with whatever it is you just gave them. And if they have something, validate it. It's okay to validate their perspective. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Doesn't mean you are agreeing with it, but you're validating their right to share their perspective in the meeting. And they may have a good point too. Thanks for mentioning that, Sue. That's a valid point. I have to think about that a little more. And you should also be open, by the way, to, if you can't get to agreement in one meeting, it's okay. You can always bring it up in another meeting. I had a situation just recently where I'm leading a particular team, and I wanted to have a retreat with them. I wanted them to take 4 hours out of the day, which was very unusual for them. They almost never do that. And it took me 2 conversations to get there. So it may take you 2 conversations to get where you want to go, and that's okay. But if you're in a valid dialogue with people, then they'll go with you eventually. Third, invite dialogue to get to agreement. This is really important. This should not be a dictation. You're not the tyrannical leader. You're a collaborator here. And yes, you're really firm on these points. But at the same time, you want to make sure that it's a dialogue for everybody, because you're looking for a win-win here, right? It's not a win-lose. If they see it as a win-lose, they'll never follow, right? It has to be a win-win. And so things like, who has a suggestion for overcoming that? Invites other people into solving whatever the issue is that somebody raises, right? You don't have to take responsibility for the whole thing. What's the real challenge here, right? You hear something from one person, you hear something from somebody else, but you think there's something behind it. What's the real challenge here? Well, the real challenge is, I got this baby at home, and I can't have those meetings at 7 o'clock at night because, I got to put my kid down at that time. Okay, I got it. I can understand that. Yep, I totally get it. I was there once 3 years ago myself. Something like that. Or what would you need to succeed there, right? The point here is it has to be a dialogue. You need to be in a useful dialogue where people say, okay, I get it. Yes, she's willing to kind of deal with us on this. Finally, after the meeting, first, say thanks to everybody. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your time. And say why this is important or why you're thankful. We're on our way to better teamwork and success for all of us. Or this is really going to deliver a higher level of service to our clients. Whatever it is that comes from this, however you conceive of that, you should say that to everybody, just as a reminder to them why this is important. Second, put the expectations down in black and white. Send an email out to everybody later and say, here's what we all agreed to, just to make it clear, just to memorialize it. And third, this is important. It's kind of often forgotten. Make sure that you set some kind of a meeting to come back and do this. We call this the validity date. That is, when a decision is made, it has a certain kind of time limit or a shelf life. And there should be a period where it makes sense to come back and address it again. This is true with performance management when you're working with your individual folks on how they perform. And it's just as valid here. If you put something out there and you say, all right, I'd like everybody to really work at, 3 hours of lead gen a day or 3 hours a week or whatever it is. And they're like, well, I think I can do it. I'll try. Then you say, great, let's come back in 2 weeks and we'll talk about it. And we'll see how it's working for everybody. And when you come back in 2 weeks, then, you need to talk about, okay, so how's it going so far? What barriers have you come up against? How do we overcome those barriers? Right? Again, you're in a dialogue, but it's always aimed at getting closer and closer, in a sense, acculturating people to this set of expectations. So that's it, before, during, and after. It's not rocket science, but there's a real art to managing the conversation, right? Just as there is an art to managing the conversations with your clients, there's an art here to managing the conversations with your internal clients, which is your team. I'm going to keep coming back to that point of view from time to time, that you have external clients and internal clients, because what I see so often is people will do anything for their external clients, which is, let's say, their real clients. But they're not willing to do nearly as much and spend as much time or attention or be in that kind of a dialogue with their internal clients, which are their own staff members. Okay, so we've come to the end of our half hour here. I'm going to stay on for anybody who has any questions about what we talked about today or anything we've talked about, any leadership challenges. By the way, I should say, next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, our programs will not be taking place, our normal scheduled programs, so we will not have a call next Wednesday. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks, but I'm happy to stay on here for anybody who has extra questions. So have a great day, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving, and look forward to seeing you again after that.